Pentagram, dedicated to Henry Foreman. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth,
I got one from my sister. Bones from Dread Sovereign got one from his dad. My friend got one from his girlfriend. What am I talking about? I'm talking about memes of Bobby Liebling from Pentagram. Right now, he seems to be possibly one of the most famous people on the planet. I kid you not. It's absolutely fucking mental. So, what the fuck is going on? Let's talk a bit about that today. Is this really how you get promotion in 2025 after 50 years of playing music? Well, Agitators Anonymous, I am Alan Averill. Welcome, my friends. Welcome, my friends. Friday at noon, every Friday at noon, Instagram, nemthiang_primordial, or go over to primordial_official. Primordial is going to the US and A next week. We're playing next Wednesday in Boston, Massachusetts, which is sold out, and New York on the Thursday, the first time in over 10 years. And tickets are doing pretty well. We should hit the mark. So, get into it. And Hell's Heroes in Texas on the following Saturday. Bobby. What are we going to do with you, hey? Alright, let's get into it. So before we get into the episode, as ever, the podcast is sponsored by Metal Blade Records, the home of Primordial. So you can go to www.metalblade.indiemerch.com, INDIE, metalblade.indiemerch.com, and you can use the code AA2024, and then you type 10% off, and you can get 10% off your order. It is the home of Show No Mercy, Hell Awaits, Cannibal Corpse, Fate's Warning, Merciful Fate, Primordial, tons and tons of bands, Sirith Ungol. The list is endless. Times are tough, and that 10% off can mean an awful lot. And this is the only metal label that is still independent. Right then. Now, back to the episode. There will also be a band sponsor coming up later in the podcast, so stick around for that. If you think that that's something like you want to do to support your EP, your demo, your whatever it is you're doing, then hit me up. Slide into my DMs, my friends, and we can work something out. I remember tape trading back in the 80s, starting up tape trading. The first couple of demos I got, there's a record store. I'll bore you by telling the same story again. There's a record store in Dublin called the Sound Cellar, and everyone of a certain era knows the Sound Cellar. It's on Nassau Street at the bottom of Grafton Street, to give it a little shout out. It's still there if you want to go in, but its heyday was the late 80s, early 90s. It was the epicenter of everything we were as teenagers. We would hang around in there, outside for hours and hours and hours. It's been there since the early 70s. It was the only rock metal shop, really. I mean, established one. There were lots of other stalls, and you could go and, just lots of... you could go to lots of different shops over the course of a Saturday afternoon, but the Sound Cellar was where we all met. And there was one guy in there who tape traded with me. Basically, I'd started to write to a couple of bands in the end of 88, 89, Pestilence being the first band who replied back to me with an envelope full of flyers, and you're like, oh shit, there's this other world. Then there was a couple of fanzines I picked up in Dublin at the same time, and this one guy in the shop, in the Sound Cellar, he said, give me 10 blank tapes and come in next Saturday. I gave him 10 blank tapes, and next Saturday I went in and there was 10 tapes full of Autopsy demos, Malted Death, Thy Kingdom Come, Morbid Angel, Deathstrike, Master's Hammer, The Mass, all this kind of stuff. This is the end of 88, start of 89 maybe. Actually probably the end of 88. Tape trading. And there was some doom metal. There was some doom metal squirreled in there. As I was very into Candlemas, much to all my teenage friends' amusement and amazement, I liked Manowar and Candlemas. It was when I went into big school. I guess you would call that in America elementary, or whatever you would call it. Elementary, my dear Watson. 4 to 12 is primary school in Ireland, and then 13 to 18 is secondary school. So entering secondary school to realise my Man of War logo on my school bag was risible, and it was an object of ridicule. But stick to your guns. But I was also into Candlemas, very into Candlemas and Trouble, and obviously Sabbath and stuff like that. And we'd heard about this band Pentagram, heard about them. Those early 2 Pentagram albums, Relentless and Day of Reckoning from the early 80s, I'm not sure I've ever even seen, I think I've seen a Relentless, but I don't own them. The original pressings, I think, are only a couple of thousand, and they were gold dust. And I remember trading, there was a very influential fanzine called Under the Oak, which was done by, if I'm not incorrect, Griff from Cathedral, and those first couple of issues were only for doom metal, so they were only Solitude Eternus, and there was articles about Manila Road and Cirith Ungol and Brocas Helm and all these bands that I was super into alongside black metal and death metal tape trading. But they were so hard to find, the records, so hard. Finding the first Angel Witch or Witchfinder General records was almost impossible. But Pentagram, this was gold dust. This was like something absolutely elusive. And then one day I got a cassette and it had Pentagram demo 1972, and I thought, 1972, that's got to be a fucking mistake. So I had a couple of doom buddies, and there used to be an Irish band called Thy Sinister Bloom, long defunct, but cool band, sort of like soundscape romantic doom or something like this, and worth tracking down if you can find some of it on YouTube. But we were, the only people really into doom, myself and those guys. And I remember we met outside the Sound Cellar on a Saturday afternoon, and I showed them the cassette, Pentagram, rehearsal, 1972, and we were like, that cannot be 1972, can it? This is somewhere like maybe 1990 or something like this. Must be 1990, 91 maybe, tracking down these albums. And we'd found Relentless and we'd found Day of Reckoning, and also Peaceful Records re-releasing them. Made a huge big difference. They were finally back out there, and you heard Sign of the Wolf in 91, 92 because of Peaceful. Much respect to Peaceful for bringing back those, and they are incredible records. The thing about this weird moment where Bobby Liebling, who I've hung out with a few times, if some of you follow me on Instagram, you've seen our rather sad Boys of Summer picture which I posted, but the fact that this guy is now the most famous meme in the world, if there was a Bobby Liebling Bitcoin, not that I understand anything about that shit, it would probably be going through the roof right now. And when members of your own family, who don't even know who it is, but presume it's something that you like, are sending you clips and memes, you're like, what the fuck is going on? Because Pentagram, those early records, not only are they absolutely incredible, they're some of the greatest. Like, there's a dark groove to them, and those early 80s records. If the 70s records, First Days Here and First Days Here Too, I mean, this is all absolutely essential. And all week I'd been on this massive Pentagram buzz, as they have a new album called Lightning in a Bottle, which is pretty good. It reminds me a little bit of some of their mid-90s records, but it's not bad. But these early 90s records were gold dust, absolute gold dust. I think the copy of Relentless is blue, as if I've, shimmering on the horizon like some vinyl chimera that I was never, a vinyl oasis that every time, you think you're reaching out to get to it, it isn't really there. And it really is very strange. It really is very strange that he has become so famous. Now, it's absolutely priceless marketing, and it made me think, is this how promo works now? You've probably heard me talk about on the podcast how it feels like, some of you watch Rick Beato, he's a kind of an old producer guitar guy who has a very big YouTube channel, and sometimes he hits the nail on the head. Some other times I'm a bit okay, he doesn't really get to the nub or the issues of really why bands are not popular anymore. He doesn't really consider cultural or political issues, I think, which do have an effect on that. But he posted an interview with some head of Warner or head of Geffen, and what this guy was trying to sort of say is like, hey, look, we're realistically trying to find somebody who's famous already on their own steam and harness us to their energy, as in they have to be content creators. I made comments before about some of these newer metal bands, whether it's Knock Loose, whether it's Loaded to Prevail, all this kind of stuff that, you know, is in a totally different world, and a different world of Pentagram, it must be said, although maybe not now, because Bobby just outstripped them in terms of fame somehow. Now, if it translates to people coming in the door to see Pentagram, brilliant. I did have a look there on 345,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. That's a big number. That's a really big number. So something must be working. But to go back to this moment. Anyway, back to the comment. What this guy who was running, I guess it was Warner or Geffen, was saying was like that they don't really do A and R anymore. Artist, whatever it is, research. You know, well, it's not artist research, obviously. Artist representative. They're not really going out and actively looking for bands anymore. What they're looking for is characters. People who have a huge following already, which they can hook themselves into. And I've often wondered, even with some of the metal labels, you release an album, you've got a 3, 4, 5 week window where there's some promo, there's some interviews, and then it's really up to you. You have to be your own promo. Of course, you don't get paid for it, and some bands are better at it than others. It really helps in terms of those things to have a younger bands are really, really good at this. Dread Sovereign played last weekend, if that's the kind of thing you're trying to do, in Romania, and there was a band called Redux, and they were like young technical thrash metal guys. Shout out to them. And they were making content all the time, and they were all just really into it. For an older band, it's, you know, who have all the complications and the burdens of life that life's bring. It's just another distraction, another thing that you resent doing that takes your time off what you should be doing, i.e., you know, being miserable in an analog context somewhere out there in the world. But what this guy was trying to say, and I see this even in the underground in metal, you take some of the metal labels out there, one in particular, who I will not name, who only look for bands with an angle. They only look for bands who have a ready-made image, a shtick. As we say in Ireland now, an old shtick to beat them with. As in, they can't just be 4 guys in jeans and t-shirts, or 4 girls in jeans and t-shirts, or well, actually 4 girls in jeans and t-shirts, a la Nervosa or Crypta would be the angle. So to speak in cynical terms, but you understand what I mean, and it works. But every band has to have some sort of whether it's some sort of exotic sound mixed into their metal, or some sort of image. You know, I spoke before on the podcast about watching Batushka, and all the younger people who were there were filming their setup on the stage. It was a kind of fear of missing out, sharing moment, and everybody's looking for that. But this is up to bands to do it themselves. Labels, in a way, I'm not going to say they're redundant, but they kind of, you can see, especially not with heavy metal, because heavy metal is so old-fashioned, and it's still got bands and 5 members and gear and guitars and luggage and everything else. But you can see, especially in terms of more vocal modern music, I've talked about, well, I'm not going to go and name pop names, or most modern pop music. It's vocal driven. It's people who have a phone in their hand, they're filming themselves. They are the promo, so to speak. And I just watching the virality of this clip of Bobby, and I thought, is this really where we are now? This constant search for an absolutely viral moment. Of course, Bobby is perfect for it. I've been sent reels of teenage girls with fake mustaches on trying to do his TikTok stage moves. And they just keep coming. If you open YouTube now, my algorithm isn't particularly, turned on to doom metal or Pentagram. Although I all week have been pulling out my Pentagram records. There's a cartoon. I think there's a cartoon now. There's little small dolls you can buy. There's a Lego Bobby. Everyone just jumped on it. I'm sure for a moment now you could. Almost every one of your relatives probably have seen the meme, because Bobby does look, after 50 years of heroin abuse and the life that he's lived, I mean, he's a hard rock survivor. He looks like it, and he's one of the most iconic looking frontman you've ever seen. So this helps. But watching teenage girls on reels try and pretend to be Bobby, I mean, it's such a strange and like fascinating moment. I mean, what does it say really about the current state of the music industry, though? That, I mean, if it brings more people to this new Pentagram tour, great. They're one of the greatest unsung heroes of rock music, not just heavy metal or doom. The fact that in the 70s, and they did start in like 1970, that they never got a deal. It was constantly scuppered by drugs or mismanagement. I mean, the rumour was that Kiss tried to buy some of their songs. And if you go back and listen to those old 70s rehearsals, and they're mainly rehearsals and demos, how this band, who in my opinion are better than Blue Oyster Cult or whatever, yeah, I know, I just said that out loud. But I believe that. I think they're, they could have easily sat there with Sir Lord Baltimore and Blue Cheer, or just in the next generation afterwards. There's no reason why they shouldn't have been playing in stadiums in 75. Yeah, I've just done it again. 75, 76. Absolutely no way. But the fact that they went missing, came back in the early 80s, went missing again, they came back in the 90s. They're absolute survivors. But right now, they've never been this famous, and it's because of somebody in the front row filming a 20-30 second moment of Bobby just being Bobby for the absolutely classic track The Ghoul, and this is his meme moment. But you really have to it partly makes me depressed that you condense a 50-year career into 30 seconds, and I presume in a month it will be something else, or in a week it will be something else. Of course, if it translates to record sales, I mean, well, maybe not record sales, but streams, if it translates to maybe they're playing in Dublin in a couple of months, maybe there'll be 500 people there instead of the last time when there was maybe 180, 190, 200 of people who are like really dedicated to Pentagram. Because don't forget, if your scene just becomes like a middle-aged storeroom, the air gets fusty and musty, and there's a sort of air of desperation. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you do need a little bit of life injected into the scene. You need some wallflowers. You need some new energy there. And maybe if people can discover Pentagram this way, but it still sits uneasily with me that this is the way to get promo, because you think to yourself then, well, if you're a young band, you're watching this and you go, okay, we need to stage an incident. We need to stage a fight. We need to stage something that becomes a 30-second reel, which is insane fight between band members, which maybe you've completely contrived. It's not to say that didn't happen in the music industry before, or you've got to think of some way to do something that will, spark controversy, that will get people sharing memes and reels, and then you capitalize on the back of that. Like we know, so many modern heavy metal bands, like I said, the days of just four dudes just, boogieing away up there in blue jeans and whatever. I mean, those days, that has its audience as well. But if you want to actually try, and instigate some sort of viral moment, this is not how it works. Now, of course, Bobby is just being Bobby, and it's totally natural. I mean, he's been doing that shtick for years. I remember the first ever time they managed to get to Europe finally for Chaos Descends, it was hard to believe it. They were actually there. It was the most exciting moments, and they opened up, and he just he had this brilliant skill of he would lie on the stage, and then the smoke would roll over, and then he would just basically pop up almost zombie-like out of the smoke. And one of the best moments at any gig, and at Roadburn a couple of years ago, they absolutely leveled the place. But it does sit a little bit uneasily with me that somehow this is how modern music is condensed into a 30-second soundbite for a younger generation to absorb. And then you've condensed 50 years into this viral moment. But if you're working in a label, you're trying to do promo. I mean, I get so many emails every day from promo people, and I barely ever open them. If you're in a band, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't do targeted ads through Facebook. Nobody clicks through them. Like literally nobody. Maybe they're a handy way for promoting a gig or inviting people to an event, but if you're trying to get people to listen to music, not to just take in a poster, like people will look at a poster, and if they can get to see it and go, oh, okay, they're playing on that date, that maybe works. But try and get them to click through to a piece of music, it's almost impossible. And the targeted ads that you pay for, the click-through rate is minute. And also a piece of advice for bands as well is if you don't pay 300, 400, 500, 600 euro to a promo company to push promos out there that nobody listens to. There's so much music. It's absolutely insane, the deluge of music out there. And most people just trying to find a footing in amongst this. Compared to 5 years ago, the market has gone. The market, stake through my heart for saying that, but that's what it is. Has gone insane. There is so much music. People at, let's say, agents who are booking small middle festivals, 1,000-2,000 capacity, have told me that sometimes they get 500 up to 2,500, maybe 3,000 applications from almost every slot, like opening slot, for bands trying to play. Everyone is out there trying to do the same thing. And so this little viral moment that Bobby had is absolute manna from hell for a promo department, because this is all of their jobs done. And in fact, that 30 seconds does their job greater than they could possibly imagine doing, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. It's like a 30-second clip has just made Pentagram and Bobby, it's brought whole doom metal back out of the shadows for a bit. Now, again, whether it has any knock-on effect to other bands, I don't know. I mean, there was a moment 10 or 15 years ago where doom metal, because doom metal has a very cool 70s kind of occult, witches of Instagram kind of vibe to it, which allows for some dressing up and it allows for accessorizing and it has a fucking cool, has a bit of a sort of Manson family cool vibe to it, 70s hard rock and doom that Pentagram has. Pentagram could be cool. There's something cool in a way that, a 70s hard rock band now playing at 70, like UFO, maybe Phil Mogg is the same age, a little bit older than Bobby Liebling. Teenagers are not going to be going out to see UFO, but they might get something cool from a Pentagram show. And also the music. There's a kind of dark, satanic cool to Pentagram and to this kind of doom metal in general. It's a dark thing that a Candlemass doesn't have, but it's downstream of Electric Wizard. And I remember when Electric Wizard got super popular, speaking to people at Electric Wizard who were into Electric Wizard who had never even listened to Black Sabbath. But Electric Wizard was the coolest band on the planet for a good few years. But it does sit uneasy with you as a fan of a band to all of a sudden see, like, is there an element of mockery involved in it? Is it just, kind of not taking the music seriously? Well, of course it isn't, because that's what the modern age encourages us to do, to condense everything to a viral moment, a 30-second load, So it's at this moment that I'm going to do the second ad read, and that's for the band Bloodbark. My feeling is they want to remain in the shadows, a little bit unknown. Interesting stuff. I'm going to read a little bit here. It started as a perfect representation of the majestic and atmospheric black metal. A crisp yet cold and complex distinction of the majestic. Wow, there you go. The new album is called Sacred Sound of Solitude, and it's out on Northern Silence Records. This is, I suppose, what could we call it? Forest-dwelling, atmospheric black metal. You can hear it underneath me talking here, and I'm going to put out a full track next week for everybody to hear. But it's interesting stuff. It's dark, atmospheric, should I say 90s style black metal? But you can go to bloodbark.bandcamp.com, and that is bark as in B-A-R-K, facebook.com/bloodbark. It's worthy of a listen. Go and do it, and you'll hear a full song next week. But this viral Pentagram moment, it sort of speaks to an awful lot of things within the modern music industry that, like as I said, try as anyone working the promo department for the new Pentagram album might, they could never manage to replicate this. And I'm sure there are younger bands who sit around going, how do we get this moment? How do we create this moment? And like I said, for those of us who worry about the nature of art or the nature of creativity, where it's going. I did a podcast last week about where AI trains its models, you know, and theoretically some of those teenage girls who are pretending to be Bobby in the reels, they could ask AI, I want a late 70s doom rock record with this and this and this, and maybe they could start their own Pentagram, for example. But what it sort of proves is the inability, I suppose, the smaller and smaller influence that traditional advertising and labels can manage to have over everybody's listening trends. There is still some written word magazines hanging in there for dear life, and they do have their traditional readership, and that's great, the likes of Def Forever in Germany and that kind of thing. But nothing, you know, back in the day, it may surprise you that like a full page ad on the back of some of those huge magazines back in the 90s and stuff, this was thousands and thousands and thousands of euro for a full page ad. It still costs tons to make even the small ads in those magazines. I was just advising, like I said, some friends, or which is carried over into the podcast, but that actually Facebook targeted ads, it doesn't really do any fucking good, because it's like cold calling someone. It's like calling up and going, hey, have you tried blah, 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 you know? Except far less efficient. I get so many mails in my inbox every day, and do I ever click through and listen to the music? Never. It's an unsolicited email from a band I've never heard of, and it's very, very rare. I would say 1 in 50 to 100 I ever click through. That may sound bad, but yet, and then I wake up and turn on my WhatsApp and I'm getting memes from family members of Bobby from Pentagram. And then this could have happened to him in a moment, maybe, where the band were not together, we're not touring. It just happened to coincide with this new album called Lightning in a Bottle. Does it matter if it's good? I mean, it's not a bad record. Like I said, it reminds me of some of the, you know, Before Warren maybe or something. It's in the vein of the last couple of records. It's missing, I think, a little bit of tone, but it's pretty cool. There's a song on it, I think it's called Lady Heroine or something, which is quite haunting. But is something like this one of the only ways to reach a younger audience, to be able to hold their attention, because it allows for people to reinvent the moment themselves? It's a short, sharp burst of, which is a fascinating look into maybe a kind of music you don't know anything about. If you're looking in from the outside, it does seem rather odd and creepy, and you do want to go and investigate it yourself. But it's not like sit down and listen to this. There's no element of that, which is how many of us as teenagers got into music. Somebody sat down and went, hey, have you heard UFO Strangers in the Night? Here you go, listen to this. That's kind of, you know, when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it was, that was one of my first records, was UFO. I don't think, it's very rare that's happening anymore. But maybe that's just how it is. I'd be curious to see how Bobby's Instagram numbers went up. I presume they took a huge, huge jump, because he's everywhere now. He's looking through, he's popping up in my feed, looking through Amoeba Records in LA. He's talking about Bang. He's talking about Sir Lord Baltimore, who are killer, by the way. He's talking about 70s rock. He's popping up constantly. There's a whole now side industry of people showing you how to play the song The Ghoul on the guitar as a little side hustle. Am I going to buy a Lego Bobby Liebling? I mean, I could be persuaded. Not really my kind of thing, but there are now Lego Bobby Lieblings. Yeah, there's going to be little dolls of Bobby Liebling. I guess it's easy to be an old curmudgeon who just remembers when things just seem more natural. And I think what disturbs me most is the kind of sort of lack of respect for the music. Everything is just all about the optics. I've said it before on the podcast that music has become at the backdrop to whatever it is that you're doing. It's not the soundtrack to people's lives anymore. I mean, it is sometimes, but you know, I tend to sometimes, paint with broad strokes, which sometimes irritates people. But by and large, this is not how it is anymore. People want music to be the backdrop of whatever it is that they're doing. Something that's playing in the background while they're doing weights, while they're doing training, while they're doing something silly, or while they're standing in a room in front of a fan with their hair and a fake mustache on, trying to pretend to be Bobby Liebling, one of rock's great survivors. I would advise going back to look at the documentary that was made about 15 years ago about Bobby Liebling. There's some genuinely harrowing stuff in there, and you realise the grimness of heroin, if you needed reminding. As if you grew up in the 80s and in a lot of cities in Europe, you didn't need reminding of that. But the kind of dark relationship between heroin and rock, especially in the 1970s and the 1980s, how many, or late 60s, how many very famous people he claimed who tried to kind of sideswipe it. And so on those terms alone, maybe there's something very viscerally, very simply glorious, if you're an old Pentagram fan, to look at this, to just throw your hands up and go, look at this crazy moment that Bobby's leaping through. One of rock's great survivors, who's managed to dodge Lady Heroin for 50 years, is now finally on the bedroom walls of teenage girls. I mean, maybe that's what he wanted all along. My friends, it's a bit of a short one today. Next week we're going to America, but I'm going to keep trying to, put out the podcasts, and I'm going to try and do a couple of interviews while I'm over there. Remember, New York next Thursday, and check out Bloodbark. The links will be underneath the podcast to go and listen to some of their music. Go and do that. Support independent music. And just keep those Bobby memes coming, I guess, and let's just enjoy them for what they are. Doom metal cockroaches. Hail to them. All right, my friends. Planet Satan over and out.